the biggest spray for wheat right now is glyphosate. And glyphosate was introduced now 30 or 40 years ago with three big lies. And I'll tell you about those. And you guys hear from Monsanto, you can take this back too. The first big lie was that by the introduction of glyphosate, we could reduce the use of pesticide or herbicides generally in America, because now we're just using one spray kills everything, and you don't have to use other sprays, particularly when you're combining it with GMO technology. But in our area, we don't have GMO wheat yet, well, anywhere in the country that hasn't been released. But the farmers were enticed to use glyphosate on their fallow years when they were saving the fields by not growing a crop by building up the water for the next year. So the farmers were starting to spray glyphosate on what they call no-till, rather than tilling that ground and killing the weeds by cultivation. The claim was that you could save a lot more water by not cultivating, which was true, and you'd leave the stubble standing, which would even save more water because the ground would be partly shaded, and you'd save it from wind and lower the erosion. All that was true. But what was not true was that the amount of pesticides has been reduced. Actually, the amount that glyphosate is now being used has actually increased the total use of pesticide or herbicides far over what it was. Because farmers are not only spraying it a few times a year in their off season, they're spraying it in their cropping season before they plant, sometimes after they harvest, to kill weeds and not let them go to seed, but also even sometimes right before harvest, to kill green weeds in our area. Further north in Canada, where they're worried about going into winter before they harvest, they're desiccating the wheat with Roundup. So it's going directly on the plant, and then they're harvesting it. So anyway, that hasn't turned out to be true. So that was the first big lie. The second one was that as soon as glyphosate is exposed to sunlight or touches soil, it will actually break down, and it goes away. Well, that wasn't true either, because now we're finding glyphosate in many of our surface waters, and many of our rivers have glyphosate contamination, and many of our soils have glyphosate contamination, because of even though we're not using it near harvest in our area, the people that are using it for legumes like lentils and chickpeas and that sort of thing to desiccate them are spraying right before harvest. And then when they harvest those lentils and chickpeas, out the back of the combine goes enormous amount of very fine dry particles, very small particles of dust that go clear up into the atmosphere. Tons and tons of this stuff. And that is either blowing and contaminating nearby fields a long ways away, or guess what? It's returning to us in the form of rain. As the rain comes, washes those dust particles out of the air. Now we have glyphosate in our rainwater, and we've tested that even on our own farm and in our growing regions in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Montana, and that's what we found. And that to me is quite disturbing. So what we're finding that even in organic crops with glyphosate, we're in a we can't control it. It's non-controlled environmental contamination, unavoidable. But it is in the range of 10 to 30 parts per billion. This is 1,000 times less than what the government says is okay to have in your food. But still, we as organic farmers would like to have none. We would like to be purely uncontaminated. And that's not really possible anymore, at least in great parts of North America and great parts of the world where this stuff is being used. Let's see. Oh, the third big lie. Glyphosate is completely benign. It won't hurt anything or anybody except the plants that you spray it on. And then it's complete poison to them. Well, now research has started, more and more research has come out. Studies in Canada have indicated people who have similar symptoms that are blamed on gluten or wheat sensitivities are really the result of glyphosate contamination. There's links to all kinds of strange diseases, and particularly your gut health. It is affecting the microbiome of your gut in very, very small amounts, and therefore can throw lots of other things off too. And finally, here in California, thankfully, leading again, trying to get glyphosate on the carcinogenic list of compounds. Of course, Monsanto is fighting that left and right all they can. The other thing that's going on with in production agriculture, so it's not just the seed. You know, in the great discussion of wheat-free, gluten-free these days, and that's just a soundbite that's so easy to roll off your tongue. But what they do not really acknowledge is this is way more complex a question, this wheat sensitivity and gluten sensitivity, than just saying wheat-free, gluten-free is going to solve all your problems. And we need the nutritional value of wheat, and a lot of the non-wheat, non-gluten products don't have that. But we can solve the problem by avoiding modern wheat. And we can also avoid other nutritional problems by looking at the way the crop is grown. And it's not just a question of and produce. And in the production, it's not a question of organic versus non-organic. And I'll get to that in just a second. But one more item in the production. Because we're adding so much nitrogen to these crops, they're growing much faster than normal. They're producing much bigger yields than normal. That was the goal. But that is putting the crop, the plants, under enormous stress. We saw this with bovine growth hormone and giving the cows to make more milk. Well, that worked great, but guess what? It killed the cows because they were under such stress. Their life expectancy and the number of their lactations was greatly reduced. Whenever, in ourselves as people, whenever we are under stress, we're much more likely to get sick because our system isn't up, our defense systems are down. It's no different with plants. If plants are under stress, their defense systems are down. They're more likely to get sick or be attacked by insects. And of course, if they are, then you require more pesticides to help with that. So it's a vicious cycle, just one after another. You put on more fertilizer, you have a bigger plant with more yield, the plant is weaker and it gets sicker, and you have to use more herbicides to protect that. So that's another thing that's going on.